You think a stroke looks like this? A person falls, can't speak? No. A stroke can look like hiccups that won't go away for 2 days, or like suddenly changed handwriting in a note to your spouse. Right now, I'm going to name 3 symptoms that are screaming that a vascular catastrophe is already standing at your doorstep. Imagine the most ordinary morning. You open your eyes, the alarm hasn't rung yet, outside it's just beginning to get light. You try to get up, lower your feet to the floor, and feel a strange heaviness. Your head is kind of foggy. It doesn't hurt, just foggy, as if you slept on a bag of cement, not on a pillow. You sit on the edge of the bed, rub your eyes, and see these translucent dots or floaters drifting before your vision. Sound familiar? You reach for your slippers and notice that your pinky and ring finger on your left hand have gone numb, tingling, pins and needles. You start shaking your hand, rubbing it with the other one. A reassuring thought flashes through your mind. Nothing serious, just slept on my arm wrong, uncomfortable position. You go to the kitchen, drink coffee, seems like you're moving around okay. The numbness passed, your head cleared, life goes on. Hello friends, I'm Dr. Lizzie Hardy. I started with this scene for a reason, because this is exactly how mornings begin for millions of Americans over 50 or 60 years old. And unfortunately, for some of them, one of these ordinary mornings becomes the last time they still control their body. Today we're going to talk about stroke. And most importantly, I'll tell you how to rewrite this scenario, how to make sure a stroke doesn't touch you. And believe me, the solution may not lie in an expensive medicine cabinet, but in your refrigerator, among the cheapest products. The mistake we all make. Patients often come to me, wonderful people, hard workers. When I start asking about their well-being, I hear the same phrase over and over. Doc, I feel fine. Sure, I get dizzy when I stand up quickly from the couch. Yes, my ears ring by evening, but I'm already over 60. It's just age. Everyone's like that. Friends, let's agree once and for all. A foggy head is not normal. Numb fingers are not from sleeping wrong. Ringing in the ears is not age. There is no medical diagnosis called old age. There are worn-out mechanisms that can and should be fixed. That example with the numb pinky that you write off as an uncomfortable sleeping position, you know what it might actually be? Yes, in 80% of cases, it could be a problem with the ulnar nerve or cervical spine. But there's that insidious 20% when it's a transient ischemic attack. TIA, a micro malfunction in the brain's blood circulation system. The vessel constricted, the brain didn't get enough oxygen, sent a signal to the arm, then the vessel relaxed and everything passed. Your body literally screamed, "Boss, we have a problem, fuel isn't coming through." And you answered, "It's fine, bear with it, just position the pillow wrong." We're taught to endure. That's how we're raised. Don't complain, don't run to doctors over trifles. If you didn't fall, you're healthy. But when it comes to the blood vessels of the brain, this logic is deadly. Vessels don't have pain receptors inside. They don't hurt when they get clogged with cholesterol. They don't hurt when they become hard like old water pipes. You only feel pain when a catastrophe happens or when pressure jumps to critical numbers. Understanding the mechanism. A stroke is not a one-day event. It's the finale of a play that your body has been performing for years. When you feel that morning fatigue, when it's hard to concentrate, when you forget a word that's on the tip of your tongue, this is your brain working in energy-saving mode. It doesn't have enough oxygen. The blood has become thick. The vessels are in spasm. It shuts down secondary functions to maintain breathing and heartbeat. And what do we do at this moment? We drink strong coffee to perk ourselves up. We're whipping an exhausted horse instead of giving it water and oats. Recently, a man came to me, strong guy, former Marine. He says, "Lizzie, what stroke? I've been strong all my life. Sure, floaters in my eyes sometimes. Yes, I sway a bit, but I don't fall." We did an ultrasound of the neck vessels, and there the lumen was 70% blocked by plaque. 70%! His brain was being fed through a thin tube, like from a cocktail straw. Any stress, any pressure spike, and that tube would completely close off. He was one step away from a wheelchair, considering himself absolutely healthy. 3 red flags that most people miss. Many think that a stroke is always a bolt from the blue. Fell down, lost consciousness, ambulance siren. No, that's a myth. Your body sends you an urgent telegram weeks, sometimes months before the hit. The problem is, we don't know how to read this code. There are 3 non-obvious signals, 3 red flags that 90% of patients completely miss. First flag, problems with buttons and handwriting. A woman 64 years old came to me. "Doctor, I think I'm getting old. My hands don't obey me." I ask, "How exactly?" She says, "This morning I wanted to button my cardigan and couldn't. My fingers felt like they weren't mine. I struggled for 5 minutes, then suddenly everything became normal." A week later, she couldn't sign a receipt. Her hand drew some scribble instead of her usual signature. She blamed it on arthritis, but joints don't return to normal in 5 minutes. This was a signal from the cerebral cortex. If your handwriting has changed, become more sprawling, or the letters became small and uneven, or you suddenly couldn't perform a familiar fine movement with your fingers, this isn't old age. This is your brain screaming about a lack of nutrition. Second flag, sudden memory lapse. This looks frightening. A person can stand in the kitchen for 2 to 3 minutes and not remember how to use the kettle. Or more often, they suddenly can't remember the name of a loved one or the name of the most ordinary object. For example, they look at a spoon and say, "Give me that thing." "Well, what you eat soup with?" A couple minutes later, the word spoon comes back. We laugh. "Oh, memory is failing. Dementia is creeping up." No, dementia develops over years. These sharp shutdowns for a few minutes are a typical sign that a specific area of the brain responsible for speech or memory was momentarily left without blood. It was a micro blockage in a vessel. Third flag, strange hiccups and swallowing. Almost no one knows about this. If a person, especially after 60, suddenly develops persistent hiccups that don't go away for an hour or 2, and it's not related to eating, this is a reason to immediately check blood pressure and call a doctor. Why? Because the center responsible for hiccups and swallowing is located in the brainstem, right where the respiratory center and vascular control center are. Fourth flag, curtain over one eye. Imagine you're watching TV, and suddenly, on your left eye, it's as if a gray curtain dropped from above, or everything became foggy, but only in one eye. This lasts a minute, then vision returns. This is one of the most serious symptoms. In medicine, we call this amaurosis fugax. This means that a piece of plaque from the carotid artery broke off and momentarily blocked the vessel feeding the eye. And the carotid artery is the main highway leading to the brain. If plaque reached the eye, the next one will fly to the brain. John's story. I want to tell you the story of my patient John. He was 62 years old. He was a model patient, didn't drink, didn't smoke. Every morning he walked 3 miles. His cholesterol was normal, blood pressure like a young man's, 120/80. He was sure that stroke was a disease of decrepit old people or those who abuse alcohol. But one evening, during the most ordinary dinner, he made one small household mistake. A mistake that millions of people make daily, considering it helpful or harmless. This mistake cost him half of his body's mobility. I looked at his results. Indeed, the numbers were exemplary, but I wasn't just looking at paper. He had characteristic dry skin, slight yellowing of the whites of his eyes, and what we doctors call a heart pulse. When I started asking about his daily routine, one detail emerged. John, having read useful advice on the internet, decided that drinking water after 6 in the evening was harmful. Supposedly, it burdens the kidneys, there will be swelling, you have to run to the bathroom all night. So imagine, a person actively moves all day, sweats, from 6 in the evening until 7 in the morning, doesn't take a single sip of water. And then that very evening came. John had dinner. Dinner was healthy, a piece of baked salmon, but the fish was slightly oversalted. Salt, as you know, draws water from tissues into the blood, and then it's excreted by the kidneys. But there's no water, no new intake. By 10 in the evening, his blood, in consistency, began to resemble not a living stream, but thick, viscous caramel. The heart had to work harder and harder to push this mass through the vessels. Let me explain the mechanism of stroke simply. Imagine an ordinary garden hose. When it's new, it's soft, elastic. You can step on it, bend it, it immediately recovers its shape. These are your vessels at 20 years old. Blood runs through them easily, the vessel walls cushion every heartbeat. But years go by. If we eat improperly, if we lack certain substances, this hose in the sun and frost begins to harden. It becomes rigid, like an old plastic pipe. This is called atherosclerosis and loss of elasticity. And now imagine, inside this rigid pipe flows not water, but thick honey. This is John's blood that evening. To push this honey through, pressure in the system must increase, but the walls are rigid, they can't expand. At some point, from constant stress, a microscopic crack forms in the vessel wall. What does our smart body do? It doesn't want you to die from internal bleeding. It needs to urgently patch this hole. And this is where the main villain everyone fears appears: cholesterol. But listen carefully. Cholesterol is not poison. It's a band-aid. It's building material. The body sends cholesterol to the rupture site to patch the crack in the vessel. The problem isn't cholesterol. The problem is that when the vessel is constantly inflamed and damaged, the body applies this patch layer after layer. That's how plaque forms. John went to bed. At night, during sleep, our pressure naturally drops. Blood flow slows down, and his blood is thick. Plaques on the vessels are old and rough. In one narrow place, where the neck vessel makes a bend, this thick blood flow simply stopped. A tiny clot formed. In the morning, John woke up and felt that he couldn't get his foot into his slipper. He couldn't feel his foot. He tried to call his wife, but instead of Mary, came out some inarticulate mumbling. Hidden vessel killers. I call them hidden vessel killers, and there are 3 of them. First, the neck trap. Look at the modern American after 60. We sit a lot, look at phones or TVs with our heads tilted. Our cervical spine turns into a monolith of salt deposits and muscle clamps. The vertebral arteries pass right inside the processes of the cervical vertebrae. If there's osteoarthritis there, if there are hernias or just chronic spasm, blood to the brain flows in jerks. You take blood pressure pills, but it doesn't drop. Why? Because the brain commands the heart, press harder, I don't have enough oxygen, the neck has blocked everything. The heart raises pressure to break through the congestion in the neck, and you knock down this pressure with a pill. It becomes a vicious circle that sooner or later will end with a vessel rupture. Second hidden factor: cortisol, sandpaper. We live in an era of chronic stress. When you're anxious, cortisol is released into the blood. In small doses, it's useful, but if it's constantly in the blood, it acts on vessels like sandpaper. It makes the inner wall of the vessel, the endothelium, rough and fragile. Clots and that same cholesterol patch immediately stick to this roughness. You can eat the healthiest food, but if you live in stress, your vessels will be full of holes. Third factor: thick river syndrome, water deficiency. Remember, John stopped drinking water after 6 in the evening? Many of you do the same, fearing nighttime trips to the bathroom. But listen, overnight we lose up to a pint of water just through breathing and sweat. By 4 in the morning, your blood becomes maximally thick. That's why the peak of strokes and heart attacks falls on the pre-dawn hours from 4 to 6 in the morning. The penny product that can save your life. There exists that very penny product, a product that costs pennies in any vegetable section, but its effectiveness for cleaning vessels and lowering blood pressure is confirmed by dozens of scientific studies. I call it a scrub brush for vessels. It contains a unique substance that makes your arteries relax and expand naturally without chemicals. This product is beets. Yes, ordinary beets. Let's break down the chemistry of the process, but very simply. Beets contain unique substances, natural nitrates. Don't confuse them with those nitrates that scare us in store-bought products. We are talking about salts of nitric acid, which in our body turn into nitric oxide. Remember this name, nitric oxide. In 1998, the Nobel Prize was awarded for the discovery of the role of this molecule in the cardiovascular system. Nitric oxide is a gas produced by our inner inner vessel lining, the endothelium. It works as a universal command for arteries: relax, expand. With age, after 50 to 60 years, our body begins to produce 2 or even 3 times less nitric oxide. Vessels become rigid, they forget how to expand. And this is where beets come to the rescue. They give the body raw material for producing this gas. When you eat beets or drink a glass of beet juice, the level of nitric oxide in the blood sharply increases. Your vessels, even those most rigid and clogged ones, receive the command to expand. Pressure smoothly physiologically decreases. Blood flow to the brain improves. But that's not all. Nitric oxide makes your blood more slippery. It prevents platelets from sticking together into those very dangerous clots, thrombi. Beets are a natural antiplatelet agent that works more gently but more systematically than many pills. Of course, beets alone are not a panacea. For protection to be solid, I recommend to my patients a support group. Second indispensable product, flaxseed oil. If beets expand the hose, then flaxseed oil restores its inner surface. This is the best source of plant-based omega-3. This is liquid gold that patches those very micro cracks in vessels. 1 tablespoon a day and your vessels from plastic pipes again turn into elastic living channels. Just remember, flaxseed oil cannot be heated. It must be added to already prepared dishes. Third product, walnuts. Have you noticed that walnut kernels resemble the brain in shape? Nature often gives us hints. Walnuts contain arginine, an amino acid that also helps produce nitric oxide. And there's also vitamin E and magnesium, which calms the nervous system and relieves those very cortisol clamps. Fourth product, sauerkraut. This is our vitamin C and probiotics. Vitamin C is cement for vessel walls. Without it, they become brittle like autumn leaves. My personal protocol. And now I'll share my personal experience. What do I do myself to keep my vessels healthy? I also have stress, deadlines, and sleepless nights, but I have my golden recipe. I call it vessel broom salad. I take raw beets, yes, raw if the stomach allows, raw carrots, and a little cabbage. I grate all this on a fine grater, dress it with a spoonful of flaxseed oil, and add a couple drops of lemon juice. But here's a crucial nuance that cooking books keep silent about. If you decide to make beet juice or smoothie, you absolutely cannot drink it immediately. Freshly squeezed beet juice contains volatile fractions that can cause sharp vessel spasm, nausea, and even vomiting. The juice needs to breathe. You've squeezed it. Now put it in the refrigerator for at least 2 hours in an open container. Only after the excess gases evaporate does it become a healing elixir. I remember a case from practice. A man, 67 years old, came with hypertension that nothing could control. We corrected his diet, adding just 1 glass of such settled beet juice per day. 2 weeks later, he came with a blood pressure diary and said in surprise, "Doctor, for the first time in 5 years, I saw 130/85 on the tonometer without a double dose of pills." This isn't magic, this is biology. We simply gave the body what it lacked for self-regulation. Daily anti-stroke protocol. Now I'll give you clear instructions that can be printed and hung on the refrigerator. Morning, internal shower. Before you drink coffee, before you eat breakfast, you must drink a glass of warm water. Note, precisely warm, about 100 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Why is this critically important? Cold water causes spasm of stomach vessels and bile ducts, and we need the opposite. Warm water is instantly absorbed, dilutes blood accumulated overnight, and wakes up the kidneys. This is your first step to removing that very thick river that provokes clots. Second rule, open the gates for the brain. Remember, we talked about the neck being the narrowest place. If the neck is clamped, no beet juice will reach the brain in the needed volume. So right now with me, remember one simple exercise. I call it gaze beyond the horizon. Sit up straight. Imagine that someone is pulling you up by the crown of your head, straightening your spine. Now slowly, very smoothly, turn your head to the right as far as possible without pain. And at this point, attention, hold for 5 seconds. But don't just stand there. Try to look even further over your shoulder with your eyes. Now slowly return to center and repeat to the left. This isn't just a warm-up. At this moment, you're gently stretching the deep neck muscles that embrace the vertebral artery. You're literally unblocking oxygen supply to the brain. Do this 5 times in each direction. It takes a minute, but your brain will thank you with clear consciousness all day.
Day, peripheral heart work.
Many think that only the heart is responsible for circulation. This is a mistake. The heart is the main pump, but it has helpers. I call them the second heart. These are your calf muscles. When you walk, the calf muscles contract and literally push blood through the veins up to the heart and head. If you sit in front of the TV or read a book all day, blood stagnates in your legs. The heart has to work twice as hard to lift it up. My advice? Every 40 minutes, take a minute of activity. Stand up and just rise up on your toes 20 times. This is enough to start the venous pump. And ideally, 30 minutes of continuous walking in fresh air. Not running, not heavy athletics, but specifically calm, rhythmic walking. Evening, protection time and golden salad. Now we've come to the most important secret. Why do I recommend that very penny product, beets, specifically in the evening? The fact is that the level of nitric oxide, which expands our vessels, drops to a minimum precisely during nighttime and pre-morning hours. This is the vulnerability window. To close it, we need to create a reserve of precursor substances in the blood in advance. Your ideal anti-stroke dinner. 2 to 3 hours before bed, prepare yourself a small salad. Grate on a fine grater a small boiled or baked beet. If the stomach is sensitive, boiled is better. Add a handful of grated walnut and dress all this with a tablespoon of flaxseed oil.
What happens when you eat this? Beets begin to slowly release nitrates, which will turn into nitric oxide just by 3 to 4 in the morning, at the most dangerous moment. Your vessels will remain expanded while you sleep. Nuts will provide magnesium, which will calm the vascular wall and prevent nighttime spasm. Flaxseed oil will lubricate vessels from inside, reducing the risk that some plaque decides to break off. And most important before bed, check your pillow. Your head should lie so that your chin doesn't press against your chest. Free outflow of blood from the brain at night is the key to waking up without swelling and with a clear head. Final words. You know, friends, I've been working as a doctor for many years. I've seen thousands of patients, and I've noticed one pattern. Those people who, after 60 years, retain a clear mind and vigor, these aren't the ones who take the most expensive pills. These are the ones who understand how their body works. Health is not a miracle that falls from the sky, and it's not something you can buy at a pharmacy at the last minute. Health is the result of a system of small, penny actions that you do every day. Beets for dinner, a glass of water in the morning, simple neck exercises. These are your investments in being able to babysit great-grandchildren, walk in the park, and enjoy life, not look at the world from a wheelchair window. I want you right now to promise yourself to try this protocol for at least 1 week, just 7 days, and you'll see how your morning well-being changes, how those floaters before your eyes and head fogginess go away. If this video was useful to you, share it with your loved ones, with friends, with those who are already over 60. Perhaps this simple information about beets or the right pillow will save someone's life. Remember, friends, your body is a temple, and you are the main builder in it. Take care of yourself, listen to your body, and don't ignore its signals. This has been Dr. Lizzie Hardy. Be healthy and live long. See you soon.